Police misconduct, racial profiling, and excessive force continue to be alarming issues across the U.S., leaving communities devastated and calling for urgent reform. In this eye-opening video, 10 states with the most shocking cases of police brutality and racial profiling, the hidden crisis, we uncover the harsh realities faced by those affected and the deeper systemic problems fueling these injustices. From community activism to police reform, we explore how these cases have ignited nationwide outrage and demand for change. The shocking truth about racial profiling in America's most dangerous states is more than just numbers. It's about real people and real lives being impacted every day. Which states are at the center of these troubling incidents? Watch until the end to find out the states with the most shocking cases of police brutality and racial profiling. Before we dive in, do well to hit the like button, subscribe to Virtual Travel by Brian, and ring the notification bell for more deep dives into today's most pressing social issues. Let's jump right in. Number 10, Louisiana. If you thought the real danger on Louisiana roads was dodging potholes the size of small craters, think again. A 2024 U.S. Justice Department investigation found that Louisiana State Police have been taking the phrase long arm of the law a little too literally, especially when it comes to arrests and vehicle pursuits. Now, we all know a good police chase can be entertaining in the movies. But in Louisiana, it's less fast and furious and more run and regret it. Reports reveal that officers have a troubling habit of using excessive force when pulling people over, especially if you're not the right complexion. If you're a black driver in Louisiana, there's a good chance a broken taillight might turn into a full-contact sport. And let's talk about those high-speed pursuits. You'd think the police academy in Louisiana was being taught by NASCAR coaches, the way officers go full Talladega Nights on unsuspecting drivers. But here's the kicker. Many of these chases aren't after hardened criminals or fugitives. Sometimes it's just a case of mistaken identity, someone allegedly looking suspicious, or, worse, just existing in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. The Justice Department's report didn't just slap Louisiana with a warning, it basically told the state, y'all are doing too much. The investigation found a clear pattern of racial profiling and an unsettling tendency for officers to escalate situations that didn't need escalating. You know, like when a minor traffic stop somehow turns into a full-fledged takedown that looks like it was choreographed by WWE. And let's not forget the infamous case of Ronald Green, a black man who mysteriously died after a police pursuit in 2019. The Louisiana State Police initially blamed his death on a car crash, until video footage surfaced showing officers tasing, dragging, and beating him while he pleaded for mercy. You know it's bad when even the FBI is like, yeah, we're gonna need to take a closer look at that one. With all this in mind, it's no surprise that Louisiana made the list. The state's relationship with law enforcement is like that one toxic friend who promises they've changed, only for them to show up 2 weeks later, still acting a fool. Reforms have been proposed, but history suggests that in Louisiana, change moves slower than traffic on Bourbon Street during Mardi Gras. So if you ever find yourself driving through the Bayou State, just remember, stay under the speed limit, don't make any suspicious movements, and maybe, just maybe, install a few extra dash cams for good measure. Number 9. Washington State. Welcome to Washington State, where the coffee is gourmet, the rain never quits, and, oh yeah, the police are out here stacking up some of the most shocking brutality cases in the country. If you thought the scariest thing in Seattle was overpriced lattes or the fear of slipping on a moss-covered sidewalk, think again. In 2024 alone, Washington State Police were responsible for 22 killings, which is a number that should make anyone spit out their Starbucks. Now, let's pause for a second. Washington is known for being progressive, right? The state that brought us tech giants, indie music, and legal weed should technically be ahead of the curve when it comes to policing. So, why does it feel like Washington cops are operating on GTA 5 rules? Here's a scenario. Imagine you're just trying to enjoy a scenic drive through Washington, maybe soaking in the beautiful mountain views. Suddenly, flashing lights. Your heart rate jumps. Did you forget to signal? Are your tabs expired? Nope, it doesn't matter. because statistics say that if you're a person of color in Washington, the chances of an interaction escalating skyrocket. Washington police have been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, from controversial shootings to questionable use of force. And we're not just talking about criminals with high-speed getaways. The state has a nasty habit of turning routine stops into full-on tragedies. Some officers seem to believe in escalation as a first response, treating every suspect like they're auditioning for an action movie. And let's talk about accountability, or the lack thereof. Washington has had repeated cases of officers walking free after fatal encounters, leaving families devastated and communities enraged. This isn't just a city problem either. It's happening all over the state, from Seattle to Spokane. In response, activists and lawmakers have been pushing for police reform, body cameras, and new policies to curb this pattern of violence. But let's be real. Reform in Washington moves about as fast as Seattle traffic at rush hour. Even with increased oversight, deadly force is still being used at an alarming rate. So, next time you're sipping that artisanal cold brew in a trendy Washington cafe, just remember, this state might be green, but when it comes to policing, it's anything but progressive. Number 8. North Carolina. You'd think a state famous for Southern hospitality would have a little more, hospitality when it comes to policing. But nope. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time or the wrong skin tone, that famous Southern charm might not extend to you. In 2024 alone, North Carolina racked up 23 police killings. That's 23 times someone didn't make it home because an interaction with law enforcement turned deadly. And let's be clear, this isn't about dangerous shootouts with bank robbers. We're talking about routine traffic stops, mental health crises, and he looked suspicious moments that somehow escalated to tragic endings. Ever heard of the phrase, over-policing? Well, North Carolina practically wrote the manual on it. If you're black in this state, your chances of being stopped, searched, or treated with unnecessary force are significantly higher than your white counterparts. It's almost like some officers think driving while black is a felony. And if you think it's just a few bad apples, well, North Carolina seems to have an entire orchard of them. One of the most disturbing patterns? The use of excessive force on unarmed individuals. You'd think police departments across the state were training for WWE, the way they tackle, tase, and manhandle civilians. It's like some officers skipped the de-escalation courses and went straight to how to turn a routine stop into an action movie. And let's not forget the body cam mishaps. The accidental camera malfunctions, the oops we lost the footage excuses, and the classic, the suspect was resisting line, even when video evidence shows otherwise. Somehow, these technical difficulties always seem to happen when an officer crosses the line. Coincidence? You be the judge. Despite public outcry, North Carolina has been slow to make meaningful changes. Activists have been pushing for better training, more oversight, and actual consequences for bad policing. But so far, police reform in this state moves slower than a Sunday afternoon in the Deep South. So if you ever find yourself in North Carolina, be polite, stay calm, and maybe don't make any sudden movements. Because in this state, even a simple misunderstanding can have life-altering consequences. Number 7. Florida. In 2024 alone, Florida reported 46 police killings, making it the third highest in the country. That's not just a number, that's 46 people who didn't make it home after an interaction with law enforcement. Now let's be real. Florida is already a wild place. The state has some of the strangest laws, the most chaotic elections, and an alligator population that seems to have more rights than some residents. But if you thought the biggest danger here was hurricane season, you clearly haven't paid attention to Florida's trigger-happy police force. Picture this. You're driving through Miami, just vibing to your playlist, when suddenly you see red and blue lights in your rearview mirror. Do you feel safe? Relieved? Not if you're part of a marginalized community. Because in Florida, getting pulled over can quickly go from license and registration, please, to why is this officer reaching for his taser? Florida police have a long history of racial profiling, excessive force, and brutal arrests, often targeting Black and Latino communities at a disproportionate rate. It's like they see melanin as a reason to investigate further. And let's not forget the ever-popular stand-your-ground laws, which seem to work better for certain groups of people than others. And it's not just about traffic stops. There have been disturbing cases of police violence against protesters, mentally ill individuals, and even people who were already in custody. You'd think with all that sunshine, Florida officers might be in a better mood. But no. Some of them act like they're starring in their own action movie, and unfortunately, innocent people are caught in the crossfire. So what's the state doing about it? Well, there have been calls for reform, body cams, and better training. But let's be honest, Florida lawmakers have been more focused on banning books and arguing about Disney than actually fixing their policing problem. Bottom line, Florida might be a paradise for beachgoers and retirees, but if you're not careful, an encounter with law enforcement might be more terrifying than running into a 12-foot gator. So, next time you're in the Sunshine State, watch out for the wildlife and the flashing lights. Number 6. California. California, the land of golden beaches, endless traffic, and celebrities who claim they're just like us, even though they have personal chefs. But beyond the glitz and glamour, the Golden State has a not-so-golden track record when it comes to police brutality. In 2024 alone, California racked up 56 police killings, ranking second in the nation. That's right, while Hollywood was busy making action movies, California police were apparently starring in real-life ones. Now you'd think that a state known for its progressive politics and cutting-edge technology would have a policing system that's, well, better. But nope, turns out, California cops are just as aggressive as the LA paparazzi, except instead of chasing celebrities, they're out here using excessive force on civilians. Let's talk about racial profiling. Because California law enforcement has mastered the art of stopping people for absolutely no good reason. Black and Latino residents are disproportionately stopped, searched, and arrested, often for things that wouldn't even get a second glance if a white person did them. It's like there's an unofficial dress code for suspicious activity, and having melanin automatically puts you on the guest list. And we have to mention the LAPD, because no discussion about California police brutality is complete without them. These guys have a decades-long reputation for using excessive force like it's going out of style. Remember the Rodney King beating? Yeah, that was in 1991, but somehow, 30-plus years later, California police still haven't figured out how to stop treating people like human punching bags. And it's not just the big cities. Police violence extends all across the state. From San Diego to Sacramento, the use of deadly force seems to be the go-to response for officers who apparently skipped the de-escalation part of their training. Whether it's a traffic stop, a protest, or just someone existing in the wrong place at the wrong time, the chances of things turning violent are disturbingly high. What's being done about it? Well, California lawmakers have introduced reforms, body cam policies, and stricter use of force guidelines. But here's the thing. Rules don't mean much when officers still operate like they have plot armor in a Michael Bay film. So, next time you're stuck in California traffic complaining about how slow it is, just remember, law enforcement here moves a lot faster, and not in a good way. Wait, before we dive deeper into this shocking list, I need to hear from you. Have you or someone you know ever had a questionable run-in with law enforcement? Do you think police reform is happening fast enough, or is it just smoke and mirrors? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And hey, if you're finding this eye-opening or downright infuriating, make sure to smash that like button so more people can see the truth about what's really happening across America. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. Now, let's get back into it. Because trust me, the next states on this list are even more disturbing. Number 5. Texas. Welcome to Texas, where the stakes are massive, the state pride is louder than a stadium full of Cowboys fans, and unfortunately, the police brutality numbers are record-breaking. In 2024 alone, Texas law enforcement officers killed 75 people, more than any other state in the country. Let that sink in. Texas isn't just big in land, food portions, and egos. It's also leading the nation in deadly police encounters. Now, Texas is all about that Wild West energy. But law enforcement here seems to have taken that a little too seriously. Instead of de-escalation tactics, It sometimes feels like officers are out here acting like they're starring in a Clint Eastwood movie, where every situation is a standoff. And let's be honest, when police are killing more people than any other state, it's not just bad luck or a few bad apples. That's a full-blown systemic issue. But let's ask the real question. Who's getting targeted the most? If you guessed Black and Latino communities, congratulations, you've been paying attention. Texas officers have a well-documented history of racial profiling, where being a person of color can turn a simple traffic stop into a life-or-death situation. If you're driving while black or brown in Texas, you better have a spotless record, a dash cam, and possibly a lawyer on speed dial. And if you think these deadly encounters only happen in the big cities like Houston or Dallas, think again. Police violence is spread across the entire state, from bustling metro areas to small towns where everybody knows your name. But apparently, that won't save you if an officer decides you look suspicious. The scariest part? Accountability is practically non-existent. Texas has one of the worst records when it comes to holding officers responsible for excessive force. Grand juries often let them off the hook. Internal investigations move slower than Texas summer heat, and by the time any real action is taken, another tragedy has already made the headlines. Now, Texas does like to do things big, so you'd think the state would be big on police reform, right? Well, not exactly. While activists have been pushing for body cams, stricter training, and accountability measures, progress has been slower than a Whataburger drive-thru at 2 a.m. So, if you're in Texas, keep your hands visible, don't make sudden movements, and maybe pray a little. Because in this state, even a routine encounter with law enforcement can turn deadly real quick. Number 4. Arizona. Arizona, the land of scorching deserts, breathtaking canyons, and a police force that might just be as aggressive as the summer sun. In 2024, Arizona reported a rate of 3.78 police killings per million residents, making it one of the deadliest states when it comes to law enforcement encounters. If you thought dodging rattlesnakes and avoiding dehydration were your biggest worries here, think again. Now, Arizona is known for being a little rough around the edges. This is the state where Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the self-proclaimed toughest sheriff in America, ran an infamous tent city jail, where inmates were forced to live in triple-digit heat, wearing pink underwear. That should tell you everything you need to know about Arizona's law enforcement culture. But unfortunately, the Wild West mentality isn't just a thing of the past, it's still very much alive, and some officers are out here acting like bounty hunters instead of public servants. The real problem? Arizona cops have a nasty habit of escalating situations that shouldn't even be tense in the first place. A simple traffic stop could turn into a full-blown SWAT operation. A mental health crisis? Officers are more likely to pull a gun than call for help. Even minor infractions can turn into dangerous, sometimes fatal encounters, especially if you're Black, Latino, Indigenous, or just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And speaking of racial profiling, Arizona practically invented it. Remember SB 1070, the infamous Show Me Your Papers law? Even though parts of it were struck down, racial profiling never really left Arizona. Law enforcement here still disproportionately stops, searches, and arrests minorities, especially Latino and Indigenous communities. If your skin has even a hint of melanin, you might as well carry 3 forms of ID and a notarized statement confirming you were, in fact, born on planet Earth. And the worst part? Accountability is as rare as rain in Phoenix. Officers who use excessive force often get slaps on the wrist, if that. Investigations drag on, police unions protect bad cops, and by the time any justice rolls around, another avoidable police killing has already made the headlines. Arizona may be known for its rugged beauty, but when it comes to policing, it's lawless in all the wrong ways. So if you ever find yourself in the Grand Canyon state, stay hydrated, stay cautious, and maybe don't get pulled over, because the heat isn't the only thing that'll burn you. Number 3. Wyoming. Wyoming, America's least populated state where there are more cows than people and vast open spaces stretch for miles. You'd think that in a state where nobody lives close enough to hear you scream, police wouldn't have much to do. But apparently, they're making up for the low population with some of the highest rates of police killings in the country. In 2024, Wyoming had a staggering 5.2 police killings per million residents, ranking among the deadliest states for law enforcement encounters. Now let's put that into perspective. Wyoming isn't exactly New York City. There's no daily crime wave, no massive protests, and no traffic congestion that turns road rage into a felony offense. In fact, most of Wyoming's crime probably involves somebody's horse getting loose, or an occasional bar fight over whose truck is bigger. So why are police acting like they're fighting crime in Gotham City? It seems that Wyoming law enforcement has adopted the shoot first, ask questions later approach. And let's be honest, it's not like they're too busy with other things. With fewer than 600,000 residents in the entire state, you'd think officers could afford to be a little more patient before resorting to deadly force. But nope. When it comes to pulling the trigger, Wyoming officers lead the pack. And let's talk about who's being targeted. If you're indigenous, black, or just someone who looks a little too unfamiliar in these small towns, you might find yourself on the receiving end of extra scrutiny. Or worse. The state has a long, ugly history of racial profiling, especially against Native American communities, many of whom have reported harassment, over-policing, and unnecessary force during routine stops. So what's the deal? Are Wyoming police just bored? Do they wake up every morning thinking, "Welp, let's turn this traffic stop into an action scene"? Because with a population this small, every police killing makes a huge impact. Yet, accountability? Almost non-existent. Investigations drag on, reports get buried, and officers rarely face consequences. At this rate, Wyoming might need fewer cops and more de-escalation training, because when your state has more wildlife than people, and yet one of the highest police killing rates in America, something is seriously off. So, if you're ever passing through Wyoming, just remember, watch out for the bears and the police. Number 2. Montana. Montana, the land of breathtaking landscapes, endless skies, and apparently one of the most dangerous places in America for a police encounter. You'd think that in a state where the biggest daily dilemma is deciding which mountain to admire, police brutality wouldn't even be on the radar. But nope, in 2024, Montana law enforcement officers killed 7.38 people per million residents, making it the worst state per capita for police violence. That's right, folks. Montana isn't just leading the nation in stunning national parks, it's also dominating in excessive force. Now let's break this down. Montana has barely over 1 million people spread across 147,000 square miles, which means you could drive for hours without seeing another human being. So who exactly are the cops pulling over? Buffalo? A rogue grizzly bear? With numbers like these, it almost feels like Montana police are actively searching for reasons to use force, because it's not like they have that many people to police. And let's talk about racial profiling. Because yes, even in a state that is overwhelmingly white, law enforcement still manages to find minorities to target. Indigenous communities in Montana have reported rampant over-policing, wrongful detainments, and violent encounters that disproportionately affect them. It's like police see melanin and think, ah yes, probable cause. But it's not just about traffic stops gone wrong. Montana has one of the highest rates of officer-involved shootings in the country. And before anyone argues, but maybe crime is out of control. Let's be real. This is Montana. Crime here isn't exactly resembling Grand Theft Auto. The state consistently ranks below the national average in violent crime. So why does it have one of the highest police killing rates? It all boils down to a serious lack of accountability. When law enforcement does step over the line, which clearly is happening a lot, investigations are slow, punishments are rare, and many officers walk away without consequences. It's almost like Montana police operate on a Wild West mentality, except this isn't the 1800s, and last time we checked, we weren't living in a Clint Eastwood movie. So, if you're heading to Montana for some fresh air and stunning scenery, just remember, you might be safer running into a grizzly bear than into the wrong cop. Number 1. New Mexico. If you thought the biggest danger in New Mexico was dehydration or an unexpected alien abduction in Roswell, think again. Turns out the real threat isn't the desert heat, it's the police. As of November 2024, New Mexico had the highest rate of people killed by law enforcement in the entire country. Yep, the land of enchantment has officially become the land of overly trigger-happy cops. Now let's pause for a second. New Mexico isn't exactly packed with major metropolitan chaos. There's no New York City hustle, no Los Angeles traffic wars, and certainly no Chicago-style gang rivalries. So, what's with all the deadly force? Are officers bored? Overcompensating? Practicing for a role in the next Western film? Because somehow, New Mexico police managed to kill more people per capita than any other state, and that's a statistic nobody wants to be number one in. And let's talk about who's being targeted. Spoiler alert, it's disproportionately indigenous, Latino, and Black communities. Indigenous people, in particular, make up a tiny percentage of the state's population, but a massive portion of police brutality victims. It's almost like cops in New Mexico think they're still living in the Wild West, enforcing laws with less patience and more bullets. Traffic stops? Deadly. Routine calls? Somehow escalated into fatal encounters. Mental health crises? Instead of de-escalation, officers are more likely to pull out a gun than call for backup. In fact, New Mexico has been widely criticized for its poorly trained officers, lack of oversight, and disturbingly high use of force incidents. And accountability? Yeah, right. Even when officers are caught red-handed using excessive force, investigations drag on forever, and actual punishments are about as rare as rain in the desert. By the time anything happens, the media cycle has moved on, and another avoidable police killing is already making headlines. At this point, New Mexico police might as well be running their own fight club, because the numbers don't lie. Law enforcement in this state is out of control. So, if you're visiting for the stunning landscapes, just remember, stay hydrated, avoid alien conspiracies, and maybe don't get pulled over, because in this state, even a simple police interaction can turn deadly. And there you have it. 10 states where police brutality and racial profiling aren't just occasional issues. They're practically baked into the system. From New Mexico's disturbing police killing rates to Texas's out-of-control force and Montana's Wild West mentality, it's clear that law enforcement problems aren't just happening in one corner of the country. They're everywhere. But here's the real question. What's actually being done about it? Are reforms happening fast enough? Are officers really being held accountable? Or are we just seeing the same cycle repeat itself? Outrage, protests, investigations, and then nothing really changes. This isn't just about statistics. It's about real people losing their lives in situations that should never turn deadly. So what do we do next? We talk about it, we demand change, and we hold those in power accountable. Because the minute we stop paying attention, the cycle continues. What do you think? Have you experienced or witnessed police misconduct in your state? Drop a comment below. Your voice matters. And hey, if you found this eye-opening, hit that like button so more people can see what's really happening in America. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more deep dives into the biggest social issues we need to be talking about. Stay safe out there, and as always, question everything.